Grab your gear, let's hit the water. Paddle and fin, where the vibe gets hotter. Kayak fishing, straight talk, hear the stories unfold. Solving freshwater adventures bold. With multiple hosts, yeah, the crew's all here. Casting lines in rivers, no need for fear. From the east to the west, we're making waves. Join the tournament hype, see how it raves. Paddle and fin, we're on the go. From the lakes to the oceans, let the good times flow. Fishing tales and triumphs will paint the scene. Give reviews and profiles, you know what we mean. Bring special guests, every episode shines. This is kayak fishing, where the world aligns.
What is going on, everybody? I'm your host, Adam Pross, and I welcome you to another episode of the River Run Podcast. As I always start this, if you are enjoying the show, you are watching it either on YouTube or you're listening to it right now on Spotify, go ahead and hit that follow. That follow will keep you up to date with all the new episodes that got coming out, lined up, previous episodes, and all the content that comes along with it. My guest today for this episode is the one and only Rus Snyders. Rus Snyders has been previously on the podcast, and just a quick little intro to this. When I had Rus on, we were talking about his iRod, and this iRod is the Snyders Sniper Rod, and it is the IRG753C. This thing is a really awesome rod. And he had kind of put this idea in my head, and I was kind of like, I really like 7'5" length, and a rod for me is like, yeah, that's heaven. Like that is just that's my ideal length in a casting rod. So I ended up picking it up last summer, and I had the opportunity to go out there and fish it, and I really put it through the paces. I can't really say that I'm going to take that back. I didn't really put it through the paces yet because I only used it for a couple of months, but I will tell you this. I threw just about everything underneath the sun, including, what it was intended for, because Rus had the idea that this was like another chatterbait, spinnerbait rod, rattle trap rod. And I started going from, everything from reaction baits to worms on it, you name it. And it became a rod that I really went out. And I'm a really minimalist angler when it comes to these things, especially kayaking. Like I don't really want to take a lot of rods, all that. So I really take what I can do. And having a rod that does multiple things, because I've always been this type, multi-technique rod to me is like gold. So, yeah, so Rus is going to come on the show, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to have this, we're going to pick his brain apart about this, and we're also going to get a little info, because I'm not too familiar with iRod. I understand it's a California company, but I kind of want to know more. So without further ado, let's bring him on, Rus Snyders. Rus, how's it going, man?
Good, Adam. Thanks for having me on, man.
Dude, anytime.
Yeah, thanks for saying so many good things, and it's great hearing that you've been really enjoying the rod. And yeah,
I gotta tell you, I'll be honest with you, man. Like from the first time when you came on the podcast and we were talking about this, and it was a very, we briefly touched on it, and then I was like, this seems like this might be right up my alley, and you're in kayak fishing, you don't need an introduction. You know what I mean? Like you are one of the, I would say, most talented anglers that I follow. somebody, and even in not just in, you know, your performance on the water, but you're a talented like tackle crafting, bait creator, you know, like you put a lot of effort in there, and then your craftsmanship into this Snyders Sniper Rod is, to me, is like, this is worth talking about, you know what I mean? And I think as an angler, and other anglers that follow maybe in my suit, or just even other tournament anglers who might just be like, oh, this might actually be, hearing the rod that, you know, the guy who's winning all these big events, this might actually be something that they might want to inquire into their rod arsenal. So yeah, so that's why I thought, you know, it'd be good to sit down. And like I said, I always appreciate people taking time for the River Run podcast, and, you know, you coming back on to talk about this. I'm really grateful for that. So thank you once again. And so, like, first off, before we dive into this whole rod, let's just touch on iRod for a second here. Like, so iRod's a California-based rod company that does both saltwater and freshwater rods. And
yeah, for multi-species, not just like bass, but they even came up with a new like trout lineup for like little spinners for trout fishing, pan fishing, more specialty rods and saltwater for whether it's like doing kind of inshore. A lot of their saltwater lineup is more like a West Coast stuff, like to target like calico bass. They got a lot of rods for that, and like little sand bass and bay bass, and then they have a lot of just more offshore stuff for like tuna and stuff like that on the saltwater end. But they started out just creating bass rods, and you know, the owner company, Matt Newman, he's now lives in Southern California, but I met him years back when I was probably in my late teens, early 20s. He was doing a lot of the competitions on Clear Lake and a number of other lakes in Northern and Southern California. So got to know him then pretty well. And right about when he finished, you know, tournament fishing, he decided to start iRod. I believe it was probably back in the early mid 2000s, I'd say.
cool.
Mid to late 2000s is when iRod, I'd say, it started. And another guy, Paul Bailey, is kind of his right hand man. He lives and guides out on Clear Lake. And also another little claim to fame he has is he actually caught the world record spotted bass out on Bullard's Bar when that lake was just kicking out all those giants. So he caught the world record. There's a video of the whole thing from cast to catch of Matt and Paul fishing together on that lake. He caught the world record, but the problem, he got a certified scale, but he weighed the bass on the boat, and that doesn't follow the guidelines as far as having an actual world record fish. You have to weigh it on land, so it's kind of a shame. But technically, in my book, Paul Bailey caught the world record spot, and yeah, they really in the beginning designed rods. Because they're two of the best like swim bait fishermen. That's really
I was just going to ask you that. Being West Coast, you know, that's pretty.
West Coast,
yeah.
And just the demand. I think at the time there was just such a lack of good swim bait rods, like in that mid 2000 era when they really started getting popular. You know, other companies at the time. I was sponsored by Quantum, and Quantum came out with a couple swim bait rods, and one of them was really good. Another one was not good at all, but people, you know, a lot of the companies didn't really know exactly what you were looking for in a swim bait rod. So iRod, you know, the cool thing about him is Matt decided he wanted to start a company where he works with the anglers, and whatever their specialty is, you know, help work with the anglers to kind of create their own specialty rod or signature series rod. So in the beginning, they had a lot of swim bait rods. The first model was the Genesis. Now they're Gen 3, you know, now they're on Gen 3, the Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3. But in that lineup, you know, there was a lot of swim bait rods. Paul has his like Bailey Swim, and you know, over the years they've had different what am I trying to say? Different like levels of rods. They came out with a different line. So they came out the Corcus. They came
series,
out,
I guess.
which is kind of the, you know, the Gen 3 is like that $100 to $150. I think they're like 130, 140 now. They've gone up a little bit in the last few years. But and then they came out with the Crusher series, which is about a $200 line, and then they came out with the shoot, I can't think of it right now. The top line of shoot.
Yeah, it's hold on here.
It's gonna bug me.
Quadus.
I can't remember it.
That's all right.
But now they have the Corcus, the newest
Corcus. One. That's it. Yeah.
No, there's another one above that, like their highest end, which is like the $300.
The fiber. Rod. Okay, sorry. The X-Band.
No, X-Band's their trout one. The fiber was another one. That's like a kind of a budget friendly, which I really like those too. That's a $100 rod.
Okay.
And I do that a lot when I do guide trips and stuff like that. I got a few just 7-foot spinning and 7-foot casting fiber rods, and those ones are good.
So on their website, they have the fiber, then the Genesis III, Corcus, the Crusher, the Air
series. There it is. I couldn't remember it for a second. So yeah, the Air series. That's their highest end. $300 range rod. One of my favorite. I only have a few of those rods, but the one that I really like, probably one of my favorite rods, is a 775 Air series. It's the flipping rod. Just compared to just the fact those rods are a little bit lighter, and the other flipping rods that they have in their lineups are just a little heavier. Just that Air series having, Otherwise, I'm a big believer in $150 rods are totally good enough for me. And one thing I tell people a lot too is there's a big difference between like a $50 rod and a $150 rod. There's a huge difference, but there's very little difference really from a $150 rod to like a $400 rod. I think as long as most fishing rods, once they get into that low $120, $150 range, are plenty sufficient for any even the highest level angler to do the job. At that point, it's just getting a little bit lighter, a little bit better materials, or
different eyelets, going into the wrap,
stuff like that. But a $50 rod, a lot of times people are just getting into fishing, and there's rods that are only $30, $20, $30, $40, and somebody's brand new to fishing, they might not know. I met a lot of people over the years that are new to fishing. I always try to tell them that explanation where there's a big difference between a $50 rod and like $150, but at very little from $150 to like $300 or $400, even a $200. Anything at that range, it's about the same.
It's true though. Like when you're getting into fishing, it can be very overwhelming in that sense because there is a bit of a, how would you say it without going down a rabbit hole, but there is a large group of people that say like, oh, if you're going to catch fish, you got to have, $600-$700 rods. That's you're going to feel every little thing. And I'm like, you be honest with you can still feel a lot with $100 rod. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can still feel a lot with $150 rod. And for sure, maybe there's some blank sensitivity. And this is only my opinion. It is, everybody's entitled to their own. But
if you're going to buy something that's like $50, I don't ever recommend that's not worth the time. It's going to break or it's going to not perform well. That's anything at that range for the most part is kind of junk.
For sure. And this is, and obviously with iRod, this is a great way also for listeners to understand that where these series are, you know what I mean? Because if you went to the website and and I have fished the Genesis 2 series, and I've fished the Genesis 3 series rod with your rod. And I'll be honest with you, those don't really break the bank.
They're like, I don't know exactly what, it's gone up a little bit just because of the different tariffs and stuff like that. I think they're in that $130, $150 range right now. But yeah, so over the year, I mean, they probably, just in the Gen 3 lineup, they probably have 25 rods, at least 20 to 25 rods. The Crusher series, more like maybe 7 or 8. And then the Air series, 15 to 20, I would have to say. And then the newest one is the Corcus. And I really, really, really like those. They're a little more money. They're like $200, but a lot of the new So just like myself, there's other mostly bass boat, pros. They do sponsor. I don't know if they currently do, but Ron Champion was also with iRod, and he came out with a Crusher series frog rod. It's the Croaker Crusher.
Cool.
So that's another kayak angler. It's cool to see that they not only work with the bass boat guys, but also with the kayak guys, and do the same type of thing where we can help design those rods. And there's probably, I don't know, maybe a dozen other bass boat guys. Brandon Card is another one. Marty Stone.
Marty Stone, yeah.
There's a few other new guys that they just signed to. I can't remember, but anyways, so it's cool that each of those anglers, they'll be able to work with them. When Matt first told me that he was going to give me a signature series rod, really we started kind of looking through all the rods that they already had, because they had so many, and tried to look for something where there was a little bit room to kind of fit something in there. And looking through their lineup, I'm like, well, how about they had a 7.6 like crankbait rod that I liked a lot, and I was fishing that actually like for chatterbaits and stuff like that, but it's just a little too moderate, a little soft, still a graphite rod. And they also had like a 7'2", 7'3" rod that was like supposedly their chatterbait and swim jig rod, but it was a 7'2", a stone cold swim jig. I'm like, well, there's nothing really, like, what if we make something like a little bit longer, like that swim jig rod, like cast chatterbaits really nice on like short casts and stuff like that. But when I was like bombing long casts, like on grass flats and stuff like that, when you're really using long casts and you're getting bit at the end of the cast, that 7'2" wasn't enough to like drive a good hook in, and the 7'6" was just still too a little bit soft. It was a great like cranking rod, but it wasn't really quite as versatile. So it was my thought was, let's get a rod that's really good for casting, whether it's like a 3, and I wanted to be able to cast like light. A lot of iRods were a little bit heavy. It was hard to find a lot of them that had a still light enough soft tip so that you could throw like those 3/8.
Really get that launch.
Yeah, you could still throw like a 3/8. If it's too heavy, there's when you want to throw like I said, a 3/8, whether it's a spinnerbait, chatterbait, or even like a little top water or a trap. I wanted it to have a light enough tip so I could still throw that 3/8 ounce bait, but throw it a long way. And that's, and the first rod he had, it was still a little too heavy, and then they had another one and it was a little softer, but the handle was still just a little long on it. So it was actually the third rendition of the rod. On that third one, I made the handle an inch shorter, which felt like it balanced it really nice. And it's a good length for me anyways, where it kind of ends like right at my elbow, where it's not gonna get in my way when I'm moving it, and it's not too short where it feels tip heavy. And it when we finally got it, like the first thing I was doing was throwing chatterbaits and stuff on it. And first I put fluorocarbon, but then like 17-pound fluorocarbon, but I'm like, let's see how it works with like braid. And then it was pretty quick where I realized I liked it with braid a lot more. And then I tried like 30, 40, and like 50, but it seemed like 40 was really the sweet spot. So with 40-pound braid, and that's where I'm at with it now. It's a 40-pound braid with 3/8 chatterbait or a trap or a small, even like a spook junior, or like I like those gunfish a lot. Okay. And it'll throw up to about half ounce. So it's like the sweet spot's like 3/8 to half. If it's over half, trying to cast it out, really far, it loads up just a little too much. But most of the stuff I throw is in that 3/8 to half ounce range. It's especially when I'm power fishing. Like so many of the lures that are throw are 3/8 or half. But yeah, then after that, and buzz baits is another thing. Like 3/8 buzz bait is one of my favorite things, just especially when I'm moving really fast in the kayak and I'm trying to just cover water. That's about
breaking it down.
Yeah, I'd say like if I'm going just from spot to spot, and I'm not really trying to fish, but I have a shoreline by me, so I'm like, might as well, I can go 6 miles an hour and throw that buzzbait. A buzzbait's about the easiest thing to throw if you're just like flying down the bank and just want to like throw something as you're going. But you can't throw it straight ahead of you, or you won't be able to catch up with it. And if you throw it too much on the side, it's just
You'll be
it's gonna go
behind.
too fast. So it's that perfect 45-degree angle where you cast at that 45-degree angle, and you can reel just fast enough to have it go in the right speed.
Buzzbait tip from Rus Snyders. Like,
There you go.
did anybody else write that down? Because I'm pretty sure I just did. Mental
But
note right there. When you're breaking down water, there
and you're
you
just
go.
flying from spot to spot. If there, as long as the water temperature is warm enough to do it, that's probably my favorite thing to just. And having that, like I said, it's a 7'5", so it really
Yeah.
not only does it, have the ability to make long casts, but also if you're just to pick up enough slack in the line, you have that length to get a good hook set. It has a light tip. It's like a moderate fast, I'd say. Moderate fast. It's not extra fast. It's not moderate. It's somewhere in between, but it has said light enough tip to cast light lures, and then enough backbone to get good hook sets. And
I think one of the things that I personally was taken to this rod was because, just like you said, when you were, going through the trial phase and you're like, well, there already is the crank launcher, I think it would have
Crank
been.
Launcher Junior,
Yeah,
the Crank
crank
Launcher
launcher
Junior.
junior, and then you still had that stone cold vibration swim jig rod, both kind of in doing two different things, but you brought it into one with the ability to make it multi-purpose in that sense.
Yeah.
But that 7'5" length, and just like you were talking about, like Spook Junior's on it.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say about it, where I won't, where where it doesn't excel, like let's say if I love throwing a chatterbait on that rod, making long casts, grass flats. But if I'm making if I'm back in a creek or something like that, and I'm making short casts, a lot of times with the chatterbait, that's when I'll go with that 7'2". It's not the best rod for doing short distance, like accurate roll casts. So that's the one thing where, I have done it. Sometimes I still have it on that rod, so I don't want to change that rod. And it could still do it, but it's not perfect. When you're doing short casts, having a shorter rod and that 7'2" can be more ideal. But the one thing it did, so another going, back to some of the other stuff I throw on it, the one thing it surprised me, which I never intended on using it for this, but a kayak, you can only bring so many rods, and I only, I needed something to throw a worm on, just like a Texas rig worm. And I was like, oh, let's see how this does. And I actually swap reels because I didn't have. I really wanted to throw a Texas rig. I didn't have a rod for it, so I took I took the line actually off that swim jig reel, which is a little bit heavier. It was like 15 or 17 pound fluorocarbon.
Okay.
And I put a Texas rig on it. Just throwing like a Magnum speed worm, and it did awesome. I mean, it felt perfect for throwing like a Texas rig worm too. And just by changing the line, opened the door for a whole nother type,
more
types of
things.
techniques. Yeah. So that kind of surprised me. It's one of my favorite Texas rig rods. You could throw like a speed worm if it's a little bit. That's a limit is about, if you're throwing a speed worm, just a regular speed worm, you got to be throwing it with like a 3/16 or something like that. But if you're throwing like a Magnum speed worm, you could throw that weightless on it, no problem. Or another thing, I throw just like ribbon tail, like old monsters or something like that, with like a 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce. Even if you're fishing ledge, or it would be good even for even small finesse, like a 3/8 ounce finesse jig or something like that with some 15-pound fluorocarbon. It would work good for that too.
One thing I tried on it was the swing head jig.
Yes.
I tried that with it, and I also tried a Carolina rig, and and it was not by means a heavy Carolina rig. Like, I believe it was probably around a 1/4 ounce. I think maybe 3/8.
That'd be perfect. That's just like throwing the, Yeah, that Texas rig, you kind of
Yeah.
use the same rod, but the Carolina rig, you really do need a longer
Yeah.
rod because of that leader. So that's a good length for a Carolina rig rod too.
And 7'5" is very, like, when
Yeah.
you think of Carolina rig, that's usually that length that you're looking at, or some guys will go even longer, obviously, like 7'10". But yeah, I was kind of like, oh, cool, like this is, and once again, it was just another thing that I was like, well, for me, it was like this is really convenient because I don't want to take a lot of rods with me. Might take 3 max, but this thing going from top water all the way to the bottom, like I could literally cover my columns out, my water column out by using this rod, and I was like really taken away by that. And it just seemed to me that when you were in the creative process of this, like you really nailed it in that sense that you took the aspects of that 7'2" all the way down to that 7'6" and brought it into 7'5",
Yeah. Yeah.
so
No, and I was, yeah, very pleased with. I didn't know, like going into it, we just kind of had this idea, talked it through with Matt, and then after kind of, like I said, that third rendition, we got it. I'm like, this is perfect. As soon as I started using it, I was like, this is it. We don't need to do anything to it.
now, when you like, just because we're talking here, just going into the rod here, the blank of this rod, what drew you to like this series? You know what I mean? Like, was it?
I think it was more just that was their number one kind of selling. Like, that's kind of their staple as far as rods that they sell the most of. Like I said, they have the higher end Air series, but it's not the. I think in any fishing rod, lineups, no matter what the company is, that range from like $130, $150 is usually their most popular rod or the highest seller, I'd say. Where
Uh,
the most.
the one thing I really liked about it was the down loop style hook keeper on it.
Yeah, and they finally moved it. That was the thing from the Gen 2 to the Gen 3, is they had a stupid hook keeper on the Gen 2, and then they did the perfect one, which is the right place to put a hook keeper is above the reel on top. And one that's just like a U shape that you could put a hook slide a hook under,
Yeah,
and
it's like a
yeah, it's
little
the best.
latch that comes up, and you just it's perfect because
Oh, the
there's
Gen 2 on the latch, the little lever. I don't like that thing.
okay. So that on the Gen 2, there was that latch, right? So on
Yeah.
that, on the cold swim and vibration jig rod,
Yeah.
that's the one that I have on it. And I'm like, oh, that's neat. But on this one is the down loop.
Yeah,
And
that's the
I
better.
like
The Gen, that's the
exactly,
difference from the Gen
yeah.
2 to the Gen 3. Because then it
And
allows you just to slide the hook. You don't have to get the point of it. The other one was just like a little
yeah,
thing that was on a
it's like a
hinge
little
that kind
lever
of
that
came
came
up.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, but you got to get the hook in there, right? And
Yeah.
it also, that thing ended up breaking. But yeah, and but the new one that they have on the Gen 3 is just that U-shaped thicker wire. You want to have it on top of your reel. If it's underneath your reel, you'll get when you're working the bait and stuff like that, or line slack, it can get hooked. It's more likely to get hooked on it. Even with it on the top, it can come around and like hook on it, but it has to come all the way around the whole rod for the line to get caught on it, which
Yeah,
doesn't.
because
So
there's nothing worse than a hook keeper, and it's like on
in the
the
way
yeah, it's in the way, or it's like
on the
right
side.
into right at the bottom, and you can just yeah. I'm not a fan of that,
Bottom or
but
side. Some people, I think most rod companies are getting it now, but there's a few of them that were putting it either on the bottom or on the side.
yeah,
Or the thing about on a kayak too is because, we need to have our hook keepers above the reels. If they're below the reels, and because we're putting them in tubes a lot of times, where on
yeah,
bass boats it doesn't matter. A lot of them are
yeah,
below the reel and they're laying it on the deck, and it's a nice kind of convenient place to have it there. But if that's the case, if you put it into the rod tube, then it won't work. On a couple of the spinning rods on iRod, they still put it down low, but on a spinning rod, I think you kind of have to, because it's just if you put it above the reel, there's just too much of a likelihood of the line catching on it. So you kind of have to put it
Which
below.
would make sense because how it leaves the reel.
Exactly.
And it's in in a looping fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, like that I liked about this is, when you put that rod, and just going back to like rod holders here, and I've used the Omega Pro through Yak Attack. I've also put it in the Blackpack Pro tethered rod holders, and like it's true though, that hook keeper and where you can actually tie down that rod in that, it is just perfect where it sits.
Yep.
So
yeah, all around that's a workhorse
even
of a rod, and they'll break sometimes, but not very much. They're pretty durable rod. I feel like the Corcus are a little more delicate, but they're also super light. But I feel like the really expensive rods like have a likelihood of breaking easier than that like $150 range too, because as the rods get more expensive, they get lighter, but they also get thinner walled, and they're just like a little more delicate, I feel like. But those rods in the $150 range are usually a lot of times like the least likely to break.
And one of the biggest parts of just this rod in general, and it would go for all of the Genesis 3 series, is that it's the WXW wrap now that these rods have. Like, they're awesome looking. You know what I mean? Like the black, the green, and then you have that wrap into it. That was just like, for me, that was like, no, that's really like that's a good looking fishing
I
rod,
like it. Yeah,
fishing
they
pole
did a
right
little
there,
bit different with the Gen 2 and the Gen 3. They worked that wrap a little farther up the blank from the reel seat, and yeah, I think they look pretty cool. I don't get too into like how design. I don't know, for some reason when it comes to reels or rods or how they look, it's just like I'm more I think of just a lot of things. I'm more into the mechanics or the
100%.
functionality of it rather than the how things look, I guess. But
And
you look
even
good, yeah.
yeah, I think look, and the guides, these have great guides. Like I've for me, I've seen those rods that have the cheap guides in it, you know what I mean? And I felt like, it doesn't take much to bend guides, and sometimes once you bend them, you go to pull them back, and next thing you know, it's like it's already gone,
Tell you one thing that I do that I would recommend anybody doing is when you do break rods over the years, is collect the guide. Like, don't just throw away the rod. Like I have a huge bag of just from all the years. I probably break, I don't know, 3 or 4 rods a year, I feel like. But
Well,
I'll take off all the guides on the broken rods, put them in a bag, and then on any of the rods that I have, like if I bust a guide or bust a tip, like I'm not gonna send that rod in. I get thread and a little epoxy, and I'll just wrap it on there and put some epoxy on it, and swap out the guide, and they usually hold up just fine.
yeah, it's a great tip, because I'll be honest with you, I do the exact same thing, and
Yeah.
I keep all those eyelets. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's really easy to replace, and it
Yeah.
doesn't. Sometimes if you still have, I find if you still have that the thread, and you can just almost heat it up enough that you can slide that piece back in there,
Really,
and
I tried that.
I'll just heat it. I'll heat it up just with a
And
lighter,
just put a
or
little glue on. That's
yeah, a little
it's
glue, and just let
uh,
it reseal itself. And and I'm not a rod builder, and this could be like a complete, like, slap on the hand for doing
I
this,
always end
but
up taking off all of it and just rewrapping it. But I
it's
guess technically, if it's already in, sometimes those first three, few threads right there get busted or get damaged, or kind of, it's hard to. Sometimes it's hard to get the guide back in once it's been damaged, or you take it out. But I guess sometimes you could. That's
yeah.
like, yeah. I'd usually just
And
take it all. I just get a razor blade and just do it kind of carefully, so you're not scratching the blank too much. But I just do it in one line, then you can kind of get your fingernails and just like peel back the rest of it, and it usually just all pop off kind of in one.
Well, the next time that happens, I'm going to give it a solid new try of doing this from the start.
I'll
So
tell you how I wrap them too. You can do it a couple ways, but I like first wrapping so you get the guide off, you get all the crap, the old glue and thread off, and I'll wrap a section a little bit longer than the foot of the guide. Like the foot of the guide's like this, I'll make it, foot of the guide's like this. I'll make it just a little bit bigger of wraps on there, and then I'll put on the guide. I'll also put a little drop of super glue and kind of adjust that guide. I'll look at the rest of the guide just with a piece of super glue and on the threads, sitting on top of the threads. And then once it's kind of in place, then I wrap the threads back towards where I started, tie 2 overhand knots, and put some epoxy on it.
Well, now you become the rod wizard because you're giving tips on how to fix these rods. And I'll be honest with you, super glue and rods is, anybody who's done that before, it is definitely a tough thing, can be a tough thing to do.
It can be tough. The trick is get the threads on there first. And then, because if you just put the glue, you can also just put the glue on the blank, but a lot of times it's just hard to, get it to get just right. It sticks better on when there's threads there. It kind of holds it, and you can kind of adjust it just a little bit. And then, once you get it lined up where it needs to be with the super glue, just give it a couple seconds and it'll dry, and just be careful not to knock it, or, if you hit it kind of, it'll come off. So just be careful and then start wrapping the threads over it. So.
Yeah. I once repaired a rod, a reel seat, and it had come loose. And so I decided, I'll put a little, kind of get it in place, put a little glue in there, and I did it. And then the glue was already setting and I wasn't ready for it. And next thing you know, I was like, I could hold the rod with my 2 fingers, because my 2 fingers were completely glued to it. No. I think I do appreciate good tips like that, because really at the end of the day, like you said, sometimes if you can like replace that guide really easy by keeping a couple extra guides.
You don't want to have to go through the hassle of sending a rod back just because a stupid guide broke. That's the thing with rods, is just the shipping is so freaking expensive. It's crazy how expensive the shipping is on rods. So, and then you can go out. The thing that I found is it's hard to find, like, let's say a guide breaks and you go to like Bass Pro Shops to try to, or a tackle store or whatever. Like, some of them have guides, but a lot of times they're just not, they don't fit with the guides that you have on there. Like, you might have micro guides on your rod, or just guides can come in totally different sizes, so it's hard to find one that's gonna kind of match up with the guides you have. But if you just take all the guides off your broken rods and just hold on to them, I have every single size guide you can possibly have at this point.
Yeah, I learned that pretty quick with my spinning gear, because spinning rods with the guides there, the guides obviously hang a bit much lower off the rod, and therefore when you're putting stuff in, it's really easy to knock off, like, the lower ones. And that's what would happen. It'd bend, and then, you'd bend it back and it'd break or whatnot. So then I was like, I'll keep these, and next thing you know, I had quite a little bunch of, eyelets. But now, as we, let's just, like we were talking here, and this is one of the things that I really liked about this rod, is when we were chatting originally about it, you had said, like, this is the setup that I run, and I run 40-pound braid on it. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, and, we were both talking about reels to put on it, because, at 7'5", your typical, I think the one we were talking about was the Lew's BB1 Pro. And now that one has, I think it holds about 190 yards of, I want to say 12-pound mono, whatever. But when I put 40-pound on that and spooled it up with that.
Did you there? I got a text. It might have froze it.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay. Cool.
You're good. It was like spot on. Like, and I even tried 30 on it just to see the 15. Tried that in the copolymer, and I'll be honest with you, that was those were pretty spot on suggestions, because like it really worked out. And if you're in, like, the braid just seems to sit the best with that rod, I find.
Yeah, and having a reel like that Lew's BB1, that's the same reel I use on it too, and it's just a little bit of a deeper spool. You don't want like a really shallow spool. You want a spool with a little bit of weight. You don't want too small of a reel. Just something with, because the purpose of it is to get, to be able to have long casts without much effort. So like 100, 150 or size reel. Is that a 100? No, BB1. It's like 150.
I want to say I think it's a 150.
Yeah,
so even like your
BB1, but it's about a 150 size.
Yeah, because another reel that I thought would work really well on it would be like the Corrado 200.
Yeah, up to 150 to 200. 300 is definitely too big for it, and the smaller size, more compact reels. And I like fishing it with pretty high speed, either a 7.5 to, I think I have it with 8.3 to 1. I think is the one I have on it. And especially where that helps is, like I said, when I'm covering water, throwing like a buzz bait or something like that, and just flying down the bank, just trying to make casts with it. And just a lot of times when I'm fishing, not only do I want to, sometimes I'm not necessarily moving the lure really fast, but I'm just kind of moving fast, especially when you're in a kayak. So if you're in a boat, you can, finish fishing a spot and then just zip to another spot and just kind of fish normal speed. But in a kayak, that, especially when you hit dead water, like you really want to move pretty fast through it. Or if it's, if you're trying to get somewhere else. So being able to move at that like 3, 4, 5 mile an hour, even up to 6 mile an hour, just as you're fishing, is a technique. That's something that I do often, especially during practice. So but having a little higher speed, a little bit bigger spool, because the one thing to consider too is it's, when it comes to gear ratios, is it's not really the gear ratio isn't really what you want to, as far as the number of the gear ratio isn't really what's important. What's important is the inches per turn of the handle.
True.
Because a 150 size reel with 7 to 1, is still gonna pick up more line per turn of the handle than an 8.5 to 1 in a small reel with a little spool. Small reel with a little spool, 8.5 to 1, you're still only, let's say you're picking up 22 inches per turn of the handle of line with like a 8.5 to 1. You can go to a bigger size reel and be a 7 to 1 and pick up 26 inches of line, just because that spool is so much bigger. So that's something to kind of think about when you're getting, trying to figure out gear ratios and the size of the reel.
And one of the things I think anybody who's listening right now, or even yourself, is, that's like, gear ratio is so different across the board, and it is not the same line pickup for every company, right? Every company has, it differs across the board. But I do feel like, for my use, I felt like that suggestion of the Lew's BB1 Pro with 40 pound was like, that was awesome, because, and it's true, that just that bigger spool, taking it in, and allowing you to make longer casts. Because I remember when I first looked up this rod, the whole, if you actually look at the description of your rod here, if I can just pull it up here, it was designed, it says designed by Kayak Pro Rus Snyders for making long casts and covering water with rattle traps, spinner baits, and chatter baits. And I think any if we'll stick to the river fishing aspect of it, but when you are on a river and you're beginning to break down water, and you're moving, like you're talking, you're moving torpedo behind you, you're making those casts, and you're just trying to break down the water, or essentially eliminate water till you find fish that you as you usually do. This rod has really taken you, in a lot of your winnings too, right? Like this rod not only has been successful, for the Bassmaster events, Angler of the Year, like it really played a solid role in this, in your success, really.
Definitely. Like I said, it's because it's so versatile, and like my RVR, I can only have 6 rods with me, or my PWR, I can have 10. But especially when it's limited to 6 rods and I'm doing any of the river fishing, that's always one of the ones, just because of how, when you're in a situation where you're limited, you really need to have more versatile rods than like, big swim bait rods, or big, stuff that's more like technique specific. But yeah, especially when I'm throwing the buzz baits, I'm trying to think. It's hard to remember all the lures that I've, times exact. I know on the Susky I was throwing buzz baits on it. I know at Gunnersville I've caught some good chatterbait fish on, I mean, almost every tournament, I guess I've caught at least, a couple of my fish.
Have you thrown hollow body frogs on it?
Yeah, I
I
did. I haven't thrown hollow body frogs a lot in the tournament, but I know I was just down in Florida, doing a little photo shoot thing with Bonafide back in January or December.
Okay.
December, and I put a horny toad on it, and it was working great with that. I haven't thrown horny toads a lot in the last like few years. I used to throw them more, but yeah, it was perfect for it. Just weighed just enough. A fluke, like a weightless fluke, is about like the limit you could throw a weightless fluke on it. But I have another rod. It's like a Lone Star Special 7'3", or the Quirkus one. There's a 7'3" that's a little bit lighter.
The
That's
Lone
good for
Star
like a
Special.
weightless.
Yeah.
Lone Star Special, yeah, that one is like it's just a little bit shorter, 7'3", and similar kind of moderate fast action, but just a little bit even lighter tip. And that one's really good for like a fluke, or it could be a good jerk bait if you want a rod where you can, a little bit longer jerk bait rod. It's kind of good for that. But
I
yeah.
think the your Sniper Rod, another one that would do really well with, is the 7-inch scented jerk shads.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect for that. Yeah.
Because that's a lot of plastic right there. 7 inches, and I just thought that was I personally haven't thrown one on it, so I can't say, but I just felt like when we were just talking about this, like that would be another one that I think I'm gonna need
Yeah,
to try
it'd
this
be.
season.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like the fluke is just, the jerk shads are just a little bit more weight. The weight on a weightless fluke is just a little bit too light for it. You can get away with it. If I need to throw a fluke on it, I don't have another rod available, I've done it. Anything that's just a little bit heavier, like those Z-Man goats, the billy goat, the bigger one and the
Yeah.
smaller one. Those are that's I haven't been throwing as many horny toads actually, because I've been, thinking of it, I've been kind of switching more to those goats in some of those situations. Another good little lure that I like, not a lot of people know about it, is the Strike King Raid Shad. That's a good little top
Oh,
water style. It's kind of
yes.
similar to, but
I haven't
yeah,
fished one of those in a long time. I don't even know
they're
if I
kind of
have any.
inconsistent though. You got to get the ones. Some of them don't. You got to put a bigger hook on it. I use like a 5/0 twist lock heavy wire owner, and as long as you have that big hook, and you need a bigger keel weight, because that tails, it's I guess how to describe it. It's like a flat body of like a horny toad or something, but instead of like having the 2 legs, it just
Yeah.
has one giant like grub tail type
Yeah.
of leg, and it's
Smacking.
almost like a super weedless like buzz bait. Like that big tail makes a
Yeah.
lot more commotion than like a horny toad just like kind of fluttering, where this is like and the
Yeah.
whole body kind of shakes like that too. But they're kind of like 50-50. Sometimes I rig one up and it's like it's not working right, and I gotta try another one. But that's, like I said, a little bit heavier than a fluke, where it's just the right type of weight.
So
Wake baits, that's another thing I've thrown.
yes.
Is I mean, any kind of top water can work good on it, but wake baits, I've thrown quite a few wake baits on that rod too.
I spent a lot of time last season throwing wake baits with it, and yeah, I was doing long casts with that, and it was just straight braid. Here we go, and I was, like I said, another one of those baits that it worked well with your setup. In the lineup of iRod here and the Genesis 3 series, you've spoken about, the Lone Star Special, which is, their version of, I guess it's kind of like you're saying, a shorter version of what you were talking about, the lighter tip for throwing, it says anything from Senkos to small to medium top water, flukes.
Yeah, it'd be good, like Texas rig Senko rod, or my rod. If you're just throwing like a weightless, like Texas rig Senko, you could do that with my rod. It's a little bit heavier than a fluke, but that rod is really good for that. Or if you wanted to even use like a casting rod with like a wacky Senko, that Lone Star Special is good for kind of those smaller weightless baits.
So in this lineup, what are two other rods that are in your, I don't want to say your arsenal that you take everywhere, because you fish all over, so you probably use a lot of different rods, but what are some other favorites of the Genesis 3 series that you enjoy using?
We already talked about the Stone Cold swim jig. I use a lot. That Lone Star Special is more of like a tech, just kind of with flukes and stuff like that. And sometimes I'll throw a jerk bait on it, or even another one, big one that I always throw a lot is the Gabe's Rip Wrap Special.
That's what I was going to ask you about right there.
Yeah, it's a 7-foot composite crankbait rod. It's really good for doing. I mean, the Rip Wrap Special name is actually just like that's a perfect name for it, because that's really where it excels. Because on Rip Wrap, it's kind of like that medium cast, length cast, where it's going to be 40, 30 to 50 foot, 50 foot at the most, more that like 30 to 40 foot range with a crankbait, where you can still throw it, you still throw it about 50 feet or so, but if you're you're not really making long casts, you're more worried about like accurate casts, I guess. And they also make a Stone Cold square bill rod, and that's a 6'9" composite. So it's just like the Rip Wrap Special, but that one's a 6'9", which I like for pretty much just for throwing 1.5 square bills and making it's just a short one for working around laydowns. Like there's a bunch of laydowns like you have on the Tennessee River, and you need just really short, like accurate casts to run it right down the label. I'm only making like 20-foot casts with that rod, where the Gabe's Rip Wrap Special 7-foot composite style rod, I'm doing like a DT6 is like perfect with that rod, and I'll throw a 1.5 on it, but any like short, like the Series 3 Strike King, or the Spro Little Johns.
Little John, yeah.
A lot. What else? I don't know. I throw a lot. I throw old speed traps and stuff like that. I got some other Lucky Craft, the 2.5s, Lucky Craft, and like Strike King. That's for both.
Yeah, 2.5.
2.5s. That's good for that Gabe's Rip Wrap Special. And I use that one as one of my primary jerkbait rods too.
Yeah,
and I like it better.
Life.
They make a specialty jerkbait rod, but to be honest, I don't really like it. It's like a 6'9" or 6'10". It's just a little too light. It like loads up. If I'm trying to get a long cast with, I throw like the Vision 110s or the pointers or
Yeah.
stuff like that. There's a bunch of new ones and stuff that are similar. But yeah, I was throwing that with their jerkbait rod, and it just loaded up a little too much and wasn't getting me like accurate casts, and just wasn't. Yeah, so I started using the Gabe Jerk Wrap Special. It's like 12-pound fluorocarbon, and that's my favorite rod for. Yeah, throw a lot. Should have two of them. I only have one, but a lot of times I'm switching out baits on that rod so much because every time I want to switch out a crankbait or a jerkbait, that's probably the rod I retie the most on.
So the other reason I asked you, and like, yeah, 100%, we've definitely gone through the list of rods that you definitely use in this Genesis 3 lineup. But what I was interested to know, only because we had spoken about this before, was if there was any other rods. And the reason I asked is because in that lineup, there's a 7'8" junior swim.
Oh yeah.
It's a medium heavy. And then you had the large swim, and interesting enough, iRod being from the West Coast, and you have the two owners who really brought it together, being both kind of with a swim bait background. This rod
Can you
here,
read through how many swim bait? They have so many swim bait rods in the.
so this is just in your series.
Swim, the Paul Bailey swim, the junior
Bailey's swim,
big
extra.
I don't know, the
Bailey's
extra
mag
heavy
swim.
I don't throw a lot of like really big swim baits, so that swim, the junior swim, like really does. That's like one of my staples for any of the rod. Most, I say most. There was I can tell a little story. So I love throwing that rod for mag drafts or the Zal Dangerous style swim baits. And most of the time I like throwing those with like an owner beast hook. I rather sacrifice the ability to run it through a bunch of cover and have it be weedless than if I'm skipping under dot. There's certain situations I'll use the one underneath, but yeah, that rod's really great for that. But where I started having some problems with it, because it's 7'8", it's good for getting long casts. But then I tried using it for those little trick shad, like little glide baits and stuff like that. I used to use the S-wavers and stuff a lot, but now I really like those buka bait trick shads. And I was trying to fish. I was at Dale Hollow, and I was trying to use that 7'8" rod to cast around different buckbrush and stuff like that, and do short casts. And it was not doing a good job. That rod was not made for that. But I talked to Matt, and I was telling him, I'm like, I need something else. Like, I need a rod for throwing, for making short casts with like little glide baits and stuff like that. Where a lot of times with a glide bait, like I want to see it, like it's a visual thing where I cast it by a piece of cover and chop it around. You'd see a fish fall on it. It's a good search bait too, just for like fish that are on beds. So with those glide baits, I'm making a lot of short casts. So he said, there's a rod that just came out that the owner of a swim bait company called Toxic Baits. It's this guy, his name's Caesar, lives in the Delta West Coast. He makes he's a swim bait maker, but he, I think, first started making like little rats or something like that, and then he's got some little wake baits, some glide bait. He's got a bunch. I don't actually have any of his baits, but I've seen them. They look really cool. And he designed those baits for exactly that, like fishing the Delta and fishing Clear Lake and fishing areas where, there's a lot of cover and you're just making short casts, whether it be a wake bait or a glide bait. And that one's like a 7'6", but has a really long handle. Like when I got it, it was really weird because the handle's just like super long. But what it did from the reel to the tip was almost like having like a 7-foot rod, but it had the long handle, and you don't need a lot of power. Like when you're throwing like those treble hook baits or little glide baits and stuff like that, this is definitely like a specialty rod for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it feels like a 7-foot. So I put that little trick shad on it, and it was just perfect. I mean, it was just perfect for making short casts around those little bushes. And the long handle, you don't really need it though for long casts, but it's nice because you could just, when you tuck it in the side, you can just kind of lean into them. You don't have to get really good hook sets, but when they bite it, you just like, it's already there on your side. So you get like quick leverage, I think. It's the best way to describe it, maybe. That's a really interesting rod, and that's in the Corcus. I think it's called like the Toxic Swim.
I can look it up right here.
Toxic Swim. It might be the Sniper Swim. I think that might have been a situation where we both had the same name. Didn't it? Wasn't, yeah, it might be like the Sniper Swim.
In the Corcus.
Might not even be out there yet. It only came out last year. Maybe they didn't update it on the website. Maybe I got the only one. I don't know. I'll have to look at it. It's the guy from Toxic Baits designed the rod.
I've seen you talk about it, so I
really
know
interesting rod. Yeah, but great if you're in that situation where you need a rod and it'll work good for like wake baits, mostly treble hook baits. I put a mag draft on it too, and it's just like a little bit too soft of a tip to get like a really drive that. It would be all right with the harness mag draft with that treble hook, but it's just a little too light to really drive a big single beast hook in. But
I when it comes to the mag draft, and I really like the freestyle just because in where I fish, like I just find the treble hook is just going to get hung up way too much.
Yeah.
Where I find like I can really get that freestyle into just kind of more spots that look like, want to keep your treble hooks, but let the other baits glide through. And, but no, it was one of those questions I remember talking with you about. And, when you get into the concept of, bigger baits, and, a rod, because the thing about swim bait rods and kayaks is, I always seem to think like, an 8-foot rod is just like, it's almost too much, you know what I mean? And the handles, like, there's a lot of swim bait rods that have long handles on them. And
I have a few of the big, like the Bailey's swim and stuff like that. Actually, the only time I use those is when I go muskie fishing, a few times a year. Some of the,
cool. Okay.
I have a few of the bigger iRod swim bait rods, and I don't, like I said, when I'm tournament fishing, I just don't really throw stuff bigger than like a Magda, It's rare that I'll, if ever, throw things that junior swim can't handle. But when I'm muskie fishing, you're throwing giant baits. And so, I put those rods to work then.
Well, Russ, I got to say, first off, thank you for coming on the River Run podcast to talk about this Snyders Sniper Rod. And, I got to say, if you want to check out iRod, I will make sure, if you don't know, I will make sure to link all that down below. I'll even link right into the Genesis 3 Snyders Sniper Rod. And so once again, thank you for coming on the River Run podcast. If you want to let people know where they can find you, for those who may not know, I'll let you take it there.
Just social media, just my name, Rus Snyders, Rus with one S, and Snyders with an S at the end of it, on all social media platforms.
Well, this has been a fun episode. Definitely talking tackle, and talking with the one and only Rus Snyders. Once again, you can watch this on YouTube, follow along. You can also follow along by listening to it on Spotify. Follow us on Instagram. And I'm your host, Adam Pross, and this is my guest, Rus Snyders, and we appreciate you listening to the episode. And this episode was about the Snyders Sniper Rod. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Till the next one.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for future shows, like, follow, share, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check out our individual channels and accounts too. Want to be a guest on one of our shows and talk of adventures, gear, or products? Contact us. Thank you for watching The Noob Show with Matt Gibson, Chasing the Tide with Dustin Nichols, The Rusty Hook with John Rapp, The River Run with Adam Fraser Pross, May Contain Fishing with Daniel Woodcock, Chasing the 20s with Carlisle Esterly and Sean Lavery, Friday Night Bites with Brian Schiller, Thanks for tuning into the Paddle and Fin